welcome onto the stage Stephen Leonard from Payrock with his talk, Please Vibe Responsibly.
Hey everyone. Okay, so I'll jump straight in. This talk is going to be mostly demo. With the added jeopardy of a first-time speaker, it could go anyway. So I'll start off with a few introductions. I'm Stephen Leonard. Andrew Kilgore was supposed to be here. We've replaced him. We have Claude with us today. Payrock's a payments company, payments processor. I think we're the second biggest privately held payments processor in the US. And then obviously Northern Ireland is where the software engineering team and a lot of the technology team is based. As I said before, this talk is mostly demo. You may not learn a lot. You've probably seen a lot of what I'm going to show. But what I want to try and do is introduce some concepts you can take away and maybe do a little bit more reading or playing with. You'll see here the concept is primarily context. And the demo itself is a fairly familiar problem. We're going to solve it in a slightly different way today. I think we've started to use AI and agentic coding agents in Payrock most recently. The biggest problem that I find in trying to encourage people to use these agentic coding partners is just trying to explain what they can do. So how do you explain that this thing's going to go off and do all the work in the background? And typically what happens is someone comes with a load of code that's been generated and says, look what it did. It doesn't really tell the story. Context is the important, I think, missing piece here. A lot of people try and one-shot their prompts. Give me a system that does. It's just too much. And so what you really need to do is have a conversation with that agent, but also set the context and make sure that it has the context to work within. So the context window, actually like all of us here, there's only so much we can keep in our heads at any one time. The context window is that for the agent. And it suffers from the same issues that we do. You may have heard of primacy and recency bias. So we typically, and with a lot of information, remember what happened at the start and what we were told last. There's a bit of a dip in the middle, and that's where we start to see hallucinations or misremembering and not really knowing, not really giving us the outcomes that we need. So this term has appeared, context engineering. Prompt engineering was the thing. We've moved on. Now we're context engineering. But really all that's about is setting the session state for your agent, making sure that it has the information it needs when it needs it to make the right decision. There's a lot of different ways in it for you to do that: ordering, chunking, reinforcement, persistent memory, which is one I'll try and show, and some rule conditioning. So context engineering is that next piece. We're going to be asking these agents to do a lot more than just answer a question. We're expecting them to go off and do something for us. And so we want to make sure that it's got everything it needs to do that. Okay, so that's most of the slides out of the way. This is where it all goes wrong. This is the demo. So I'm going to take something that we've probably all had to do, whether we liked it or not. This is one of the very common interview questions. So URL shortening. I am going to use WindSurf today, and I'm going to use Claude 4.5. So this is a completely new WindSurf window. So I'm just going to make sure that we don't have any context set. This really is just an empty folder and WindSurf. WindSurf, if you haven't used it, is just a Visual Studio clone with WindSurf's agent baked in. This is the important window. I'm not going to be doing much more as part of this presentation. Everything you see in this window is really what's important. So let's get started. we're going to get this to start building our URL shortener. I'm going to start with a fairly standard web API. Okay, so just newed up from the standard template. So we get the forecast template code. That is quite small up there, but hopefully everybody can follow along. And I'm going to start with very little in terms of context and set this guy off. Okay. For anyone who hasn't used WindSurf or seen Claude 4.5 in this way before, one of the most addictive parts of this is that you can watch it think, and it does take a few days to stop staring at the thoughts that are going through its head. What you see here is not something you would see with a completely blank WindSurf. So what I have been working with WindSurf for a while now, and what I found is that I personally went through the same cycle in terms of how I worked with it. So I asked it to understand the problem space. I then asked it to do something. I then asked it to test itself, review what it had done, and effectively go into that cycle. So what you're looking at here is some rules that I've set for this agent. It applies to them all the time. I would recommend that you go and look at what you can set in terms of this. This is really the first piece of context. This is saying to the agent, behave in this way every time you're dealing with a prompt. So if I just go back. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to read that. This is AI, it knows everything, so I'm just going to say yes. Go ahead. And again, watch his thoughts. So, sorry, I just want to make sure. I've done this several times, obviously, in preparation. Every time it works. Today is likely to be the day where we get something new and exciting. So let's see. Let me close this. Okay. So there's a couple of things about what's happening here. Firstly, it thinks it's done, so we can take a look at that in a second. Out of the box with WindSurf, what it will do is prompt you when it tries to do something outside of the context of the IDE, so creating files, running bash scripts, running projects. I've turned all that off. I just let it go and do its thing, but what it will always do is ask you to accept the changes. So you'll see that now it's gone through the do phase, it's in the test phase, it's starting to run through the tests that it's decided are relevant, and the tests have passed. So quite often whenever you're watching Claude and WindSurf run here, you will see it make mistakes, but it is pretty good at correcting itself, and we may see that in a second. And I think it was in a talk earlier on where someone said they'd got the code generated and then they asked for tests and ran the tests, and it was like, oh, that test doesn't run, there's something wrong. So this is very much a conversation, and one shot is never going to work. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to accept all those changes again. All right. So it looks like we've got something, and it looks like it has helpfully put everything in program.cs, which is nice. Let me just hit that. Okay, it's running. Let's just check. Bear with me, typing and talking is not easy. So. Not found. Okay. Okay, so that is our shortened URL. Okay, so what it did give us there was working code, and that's really what I was trying to get to, just to the point where we could see that. Apologies for not being able to talk while I was typing. That's tough. So what I did here using Bruno was posted the endpoint, shortened this GitHub URL, got my link back. You will notice that the link it gave me back was incorrect, so we're not fully there yet. The port was wrong, but I was able to get the redirect served here. So all very good. What I want to do now, though, is obviously what it has given us is working code, but I don't think anybody would be particularly happy about all of that code sitting in the program.cs. So what I want to do is provide it a little bit of context, and this is back to the original slide. So let me just create a folder. So this is where we start to provide some context for our AI agent. And this is a very simple example of a sort of simple memory card. So what this gives us is a way to provide persistent memory to these agents. So let me just save that. In reality, this could be entire lists of coding standards, non-functional requirements. It could be structural information, patterns, and several of the projects that I have maybe 10 or 12 of these memory cards with all of that information. We'll start simple. I'm going to ask it to review its code. And off it goes again. Okay, so still natural language, still a very simple prompt. What it is doing now, though, is looking at our 4 bullet points and starting to check over the implementation that it had. The one thing that it will have identified, and it'll give us a summary at the end, is we don't have any unit tests here. And also, it wasn't so hot with the solid principles. So what it will do is let me know that there are required changes. Again, I fully trust this AI, so yes, go ahead. A couple of things just to call out here, because we're all still a little bit skeptical. So go and create a load of unit tests. We get a load of unit tests. How do we know they're doing what we need them to do? So a first good stab at that is, well, actually tell me what coverage you got with your unit tests. Again, it's going to do all of that while it works here. And I think we got a tick for the first one, so let's see where we land. This is the point where I have seen on many occasions it actually fail. So its unit tests have proven that its own code didn't work. And it then will go off and correct itself, which is great. Okay, while it's doing that, let's just go and get some more context. Oh, there we go. That's quite a few errors. Just while that's working, I think you can see here that, oh, there we go, it's gone green. What you don't want to do with these agents is give them instructions and watch them. The point of this is that you should be able to help them understand the job to do and let the agent do it. It does require you to go back in and check every now and again, but it also does force that more conversational flow. You can only imagine, again, that single shot, give me I think David said earlier on, give me a website, publish it to the internet, run it on my local laptop. That's not the sort of thing we're looking for here. It still requires that engineering thinking, the breakdown of the problem, the conversational interaction with the agent. All right, I think we're getting close. Okay, it's gone through the do phase, it's gone through the test phase for this particular change. I want to say, yeah, okay, so we've got a new test project. We've got our tests here. Okay, so we've got our tests. It's also gone off and made some changes around the single responsibility principle and worked its way through the rest of the solid principles, which is nice. And now we've got our new structure. I'm gonna set it off running again, along with our code, our general review rules there. We typically have standards around code structure. Again, I will say that this is not our standards, but I did want something that would stand out as different to what it gives us. So let me see. I'll kick that one off again. Again, nice natural language interface at the prompt, the structure's in the context. I think the one that we'll probably see most difference here in is the fairly heavy overloading of the program.cs originally. But you can see that it started to break out the source and the tests under the into their own folders. Program.cs hasn't changed just yet. Okay. So now we'll start to see some changes here. Okay, we're getting there. So one thing just to say, obviously, in this particular instance, we started out with blank, no context, and started to build out our functional code. The reality is we want to set that context first. We don't have to go through that cycle of do something we know that isn't quite right and then ask it to correct it and put the structure back in place. These memory cards are things that you're going to want to curate as a library of context that you're going to use over and over again. And in reality, that's where we're going to be spending more of our time as engineers. It's setting the guidelines, setting the rules, making sure the structure's in place. Everything that we expect of the agent really should be represented in some way in one of those memory cards. The way I like to think of it is, we get a new engineer. It doesn't need to be a junior engineer. It can be someone new to the organization, new to the project. And you say, go and make a change. And expect them to come back and hit all of your standards, use the same patterns, make sure that they're working in the way you would expect. We wouldn't do that with new team members. And I think to do that with these agents, we're going to get the outcome that we should expect in that scenario where we haven't really given it the guidelines. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick look. Okay, so you can see now, obviously, the program.cs has been stripped right back, and the work that was being done on here has been abstracted out. I'm not going to ask this agent to do any more. I've got just one more minute. I think if anyone has done this exercise in interview, let me see if I can find the work. So if anyone's done this at interview, typically the questions start with, well, what's your algorithm for shortening? Having done this a few times now, the agent typically picks the sort of random 6 digits and relies on the randomness and the retries to make sure that it doesn't get collisions. Another one of the questions that typically follows up is, what about your query parameters? How do you handle query parameters? So in this case, what I'm relying on is the context set in the building of the URL shortener, excuse me, and it's the context of the problems space rather than the code. And interestingly, if you look at what the agent has done here, it's thinking more broadly about the problem space. It's looking at the obvious thing to point out here is that the query parameters may come in different orders, but they ultimately resolve to the same behavior. And so what the agent has done is firstly identified that, but then gives maybe it hasn't given options. So what are my options? When I did this yesterday, it did offer me that the options as part of that first sort of prompt, with query normalization being one of the options. Again, in this scenario, if I type option 2, it's going to go off and make those changes, and it's that next step in the conversation. Okay, I think we're starting to come up on time, so I'm just going to jump straight back to the slides. So what just happened? Vibe coding is a terrible name for what we are starting to move into with this new interaction with an agent or multiple agents. It implies a lack of structure, attention, or engineering rigor. What you've just seen there could be considered vibe coding: give the instruction, accept what's given back to you. But it's all about that context, is setting the rules, being the structured thinker in the conversation, and providing the context. So it's simply making that process of problem breakdown and providing information more deliberate and structured. And with that, I will call this to a close. Hopefully that was interesting. There are a couple of very key concepts there, but again, to just go back to my point at the start, actually showing this stuff in action is proving to be the most difficult part of helping engineers pick this up and adopt it. So please do go and take a look at this new context engineering concept. Look at how you can provide context to the agents. I will say, a bit of trial and error, a bit of trust and retry with those agents will get you to the outcome you need to get to. But you do need to be deliberate, you do need to be conversational, and you do need to give it the rules to work within. That's me. Thank you. Good time for questions. I can take questions if anyone has any. Here, yep.
Thanks for that statement and question I have. So I find you mentioned about being conversational, but I've actually found being nice to them really helps. I don't know if you've ever tried changing your tone of voice with an agent, but you definitely get better results if you're nice.
I've heard the opposite too. I've heard if you're really not very nice to them, you can also get good results. But
I know I've cursed at it in all caps, and it doesn't work as well. I'm just curious, because I definitely do think tone of voice, or how you talk to it, and ever slight changes in how you interact with it can really produce different results.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I think just because of the interface, it feels a little bit like a chat interface. You tend to be a little bit more polite anyway.
Initially, when I first started using it, I left out please and thank you and all that stuff, because I was trying to not use as much energy to process the requests. And then when I found that it worked, I found that it really does make a difference.
Well, there you go.
So,
your mum's right. Manners cost nothing.
Thanks, Stephen. Just a question. I've had some issues myself with AI agents in terms of testing, where it has written tests that pass, but they test nothing. So I do think that your solution in terms of asking about test coverage is quite a good one. But I was curious how you found agents at being able to do unhappy path testing and maybe even find edge cases in your testing.
Actually, very good. So. This is obviously a very simple demo just to show some concepts, but one of the things that I have been using this a lot for is trying to build out our test coverage on some existing and more legacy platforms. It's actually very good. I think if you ask it deliberately to look at the coverage that it's getting, it will try very hard to make sure that it gets the coverage. But you can also give it the guidance that you're not interested in just the happy path. Test all the same things you would ask a test engineer. Test the boundaries, test the alternate flows, make sure you get the coverage of the interface. I've been very, very surprised and pleased with the outcomes there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen.
All right. Thank you.